Okay, so this next skill is about knowing the different passage types. And I think the best way to do it is really to just jump in and look at a science section. So the first type of passage is a multiple experiment passage. Okay, this is actually the second type, but it's the first passage here. They can be in random order. So you have study one, and you have a study, and then study two, and you have a study, and then study three, and then you have a table, and then you have seven questions. So these multiple experiment passages um, always have seven questions. Okay. So they're a little bit longer. There are some passages that we'll see that have six questions. So it doesn't really matter too much if you're needing to time yourself carefully. Then it is good to notice that because a seven question passage will take a little bit longer than a six question passage, and roughly you have a little bit less than a minute per passage. So one way to think about it is if you really need to work on your timing is you before you do anything you look at, okay, how many questions? There are seven questions, or this is a multiple experiment, and you should have about 1 minute less per 1 minute less than the number of questions. So 6 minutes for seven questions. Okay. Um, but in most cases, they just change a little bit from one thing. To, like one study, this is 15%, and this is all 5%. Okay. And then they do something pretty different, but they don't always do that. Okay. So then this next passage, there's only one of these. This is sometimes we call this the fighting scientists. In this case, it's fighting hypotheses, but it's going to be mostly text based. Every now and then you have a chart. In this case, you have a chart in one of the answers or the answer choices, but there's no charts here. This is just reading. So, unlike other types of passages, there's only one of these. And in this case, you typically have to kind of read everything. Um, you should start by just skimming it because you're not going to remember all the details. You're just skimming and trying to see like what are the differences here, right? Monarch butterflies require energy from stored lipids for migration, blah blah blah. They require energy from stored lipids for migration, but not during the overwintering. Okay, and during the overwintering. So right there, you see this is not during overwintering. This is during overwintering, and you have a contrast. Monarch butterflies require energy from stored lipids during the overwintering, but not for migration. Okay, so they each in the first sentence say something slightly different. That's the kind of thing you want to notice. Okay. Don't get bogged down in details. You'll get the details when you hit the questions. But these always have seven questions as well. So at least 6 minutes. It makes sense for many students to do this passage last because it's the hardest. You miss the most questions. So you might as well save for last the passage that you're going to miss stuff on anyway, especially if you are pushed for time on the science section, which can definitely be the case for some students. Next, we have a one experiment or just a observation passage. Sometimes it's called just a bit of text and a chart. And this one has one more chart, but that's it. And you'll notice that these have one, two, three, four, five, six questions. So these should take you more like 5 minutes, a little bit shorter. And we have another one of this is two experiments. Okay. And one, two, three, four, five, six. This is interesting. It's two experiments, but it's presented all in one thing. So this is really a kind of considered a one experiment passage. This one, you could see the multiple experiments, they really separate them out. Experiment one, experiment two, experiment three. Okay. And they're just, as usual, they're just doing some slight changes, seven questions, and then another kind of longer observational one. And this will have five. So this has seven questions as well. Okay. So sometimes it's a little bit random. This is a bit longer. But so either six questions or seven questions, and you can use it for timing, and you can also just use it to kind of get ready for, paying attention to the differences from one study to the next. But it's good to be familiar with the different types of questions and the different types of passages.